The Great Lakes hold roughly 6 quadrillion gallons of fresh water, enough to cover the entire continental United States more than 9 feet deep. Millions of people swim in these lakes every summer, boat across them, fish their shorelines, and build entire lives around their coasts. But beneath that calm, cold surface, and along the wooded shorelines that ring it, lives a collection of creatures most people never think twice about. None of them are sharks. None of them are monsters from a legend. They are real, documented, scientifically confirmed animals and organisms that have injured, sickened, and in some cases killed the people who shared their water. Together, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario form the largest group of freshwater lakes on the planet, bordering 8 states and 1 Canadian province, and drawing tens of millions of visitors to their beaches, marinas, and fishing docks every single year. Most of those visitors picture the biggest danger as simply the cold water or a strong current, and rarely give a second thought to what actually lives beneath them or hides in the dune grass along the shore. Today, we are counting down 15 of them, from the merely unpleasant to the genuinely lethal, working our way toward the one creature that quietly causes more documented harm than every other entry on this list combined. Some of these are animals you could hold in one hand. Others are practically invisible, and by the end you will understand why the most dangerous thing connected to the Great Lakes is almost never what people expect. Stick around, because the creature that claims the top spot on this list is not a fish, not a reptile, and not anything most people would ever think to fear near a lake. Before we get into it, if you are enjoying this kind of deep dive into the natural world, consider subscribing so you do not miss the next one. And I would love to know. Drop a comment below and tell me which of the 5 Great Lakes is closest to you, or if you are watching from somewhere on the other side of the planet entirely. Now, let us start at number 15. At number 15, we have the freshwater jellyfish, scientific name Craspedicusta sowerbii. Most people are stunned to learn jellyfish live in the Great Lakes at all, since jellyfish are usually associated with the ocean. This species is small, typically less than an inch across, translucent, and drifts in warm, calm bays and inland waters connected to the lakes during late summer months. It does carry stinging cells called nematocysts, the same basic weapon used by its ocean relatives, but they are far too weak to penetrate human skin in any meaningful way. At most, a person might feel a faint tingling if they handle one directly. It is not native to North America, believed to have arrived from China more than a century ago through the aquarium trade and shipping traffic, and it has since spread quietly through lakes and slow-moving waters across the country, including documented sightings in bays connected to Lake Erie and Lake Michigan. It earns its spot on this list not because it threatens swimmers in any real medical sense, but because its very presence surprises people who had no idea something related to a jellyfish was floating a few feet from their dock in the middle of North America, hundreds of miles from any ocean. Moving up to number 14, we have an entire invasive population rather than a single species. Zebra mussels and their close relative, the quagga mussel. These small, striped, shelled mollusks arrived in the Great Lakes in the late 1980s, most likely carried in the ballast water of cargo ships from Eastern Europe. Since then, they have covered lake beds, piers, and beaches by the trillions. Their danger to humans is not venom or bite, it is their razor-sharp shells. Barefoot swimmers and waders across Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, and Lake Huron have suffered deep lacerations on their feet simply walking into the water, and secondary infections from those cuts have sent people to the hospital. Beyond the physical risk, these mussels have reshaped the entire food web of the Great Lakes, filtering out plankton that native fish depend on and altering water clarity across hundreds of miles of coastline. Wildlife agencies in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ontario have all issued public guidance recommending water shoes for anyone wading along rocky or mussel-covered shorelines, a direct response to the steady stream of cut-foot injuries reported at public beaches every summer. A tiny shellfish, but one with an outsized and well-documented impact on both human safety and the broader Great Lakes ecosystem. At number 13, we move to something far older in evolutionary terms, the freshwater leech. Leeches are common throughout shallow, weedy areas of all 5 Great Lakes, especially in warm bays during summer. Most species that attach to humans are harmless blood feeders that cause little more than a strange sensation and a small wound that bleeds slightly longer than expected, thanks to an anticoagulant in their saliva. They are not dangerous in the traditional sense, but for a species that has been quietly attaching itself to swimmers, waders, and fishermen for as long as people have used these lakes, they deserve a mention. Their true danger is psychological rather than medical. They are simply one of the most consistently unsettling encounters a person can have in Great Lakes water. And every summer, lifeguards and park rangers around the lakes field the same nervous questions about them. Health officials generally recommend cleaning any leech bite with soap and water rather than simply pulling the animal off and moving on. For our next entry, we head toward the deeper channels and river mouths that feed into the lakes, where the channel catfish makes its home. Channel catfish can grow beyond 20 pounds in Great Lakes tributaries and connecting waters, and while they pose no threat through biting, they carry sharp, rigid spines on their dorsal and pectoral fins coated in a mild toxin. Anglers handling a catfish incorrectly can be stabbed deeply enough to require medical attention, and the toxin causes intense, throbbing pain along with swelling that can last for hours. Documented cases of infected puncture wounds from catfish spines appear regularly in fishing communities around Lake Erie and the connecting channels near Detroit, most often among first-time anglers handling their first catch without guidance. It is not a predator hunting people, but it is a fish capable of putting an unprepared angler in real lasting pain with a single wrong grip. At number 11, we have the long-nosed gar, an ancient-looking fish with a narrow, elongated snout lined with needle-like teeth, found in the warmer, weedier waters of Lake Erie and connecting rivers like the St. Clair. Gar are ambush predators that have existed in roughly their current form for tens of millions of years, and their teeth are built for gripping slippery prey like smaller fish. They are not aggressive toward humans, and attacks are exceedingly rare. But anglers who mishandle a hooked gar have been bitten seriously enough to need stitches. Their eggs are also toxic if consumed by humans or pets, a fact that has led to documented poisoning cases among people unfamiliar with the species who mistakenly treated gar roe like a typical fish delicacy. A living fossil, mostly harmless if left alone, but capable of leaving a serious mark if handled carelessly. Number 10 brings us to a creature nearly everyone who has spent time near the Great Lakes has encountered at some point, the common snapping turtle. These turtles can weigh over 35 pounds in the wild, with some exceptional individuals reported well beyond that, and their powerful hooked jaws are capable of exerting a bite force strong enough to break a finger. Snapping turtles are found in slow-moving bays, marshes, and connecting wetlands throughout the entire Great Lakes basin. On land where they cannot flee into deep water, they become far more defensive and are responsible for the overwhelming majority of documented human bite incidents. usually involving people who tried to move a turtle out of a roadie or picked one up incorrectly. In the water itself, they are shy and avoid people. Still, every year, wildlife clinics and emergency rooms around the lakes treat a steady stream of snapping turtle bite injuries, most of them entirely preventable. Wildlife officials consistently advise letting a turtle pass on its own, or gently guiding it with a car mat or shovel rather than lifting it by hand. Advice repeated every spring nesting season when females travel overland to lay their eggs. But the next entry on our list is considerably more aggressive, and it is one many anglers specifically travel to the Great Lakes to catch. At number 9, we have the muskellunge, commonly called the muskie, a top predator fish that can exceed 50 inches in length and weigh over 30 pounds in lakes like Lake St. Clair and the Bay of Green Bay on Lake Michigan. Muskies are ambush hunters with a mouth full of sharp backward-angled teeth designed to prevent prey from escaping once caught. While muskies do not hunt humans, documented cases exist of muskies striking at swimmers' hands and feet, mistaking movement in murky water for smaller fish, and anglers landing a muskie have suffered serious lacerations from its teeth while attempting to remove a hook. Because muskies are apex predators within their own ecosystem, wildlife officials in muskie-heavy waters routinely warn swimmers to avoid excessive splashing near known muskie habitat during spawning season. And the fish's nickname among longtime anglers, the fish of 10,000 casts, reflects just how powerful it is once hooked. For our next stop, we travel beneath the surface entirely, to a parasite that single-handedly reshaped the ecology of the Great Lakes. At number 8 sits the sea lamprey, an eel-like, jawless fish equipped with a circular, tooth-lined mouth that it uses to latch onto larger fish and feed on their blood and bodily fluids. Sea lampreys are not native to the upper Great Lakes and invaded through shipping canals in the early 20th century. Within decades, they devastated native lake trout and whitefish populations so severely that entire commercial fisheries collapsed. Lampreys pose essentially no direct threat to humans. Attacks on people are effectively unheard of, but their inclusion here reflects a different kind of danger. An invasive species so destructive that governments in both the United States and Canada still spend tens of millions of dollars every year on lampricide treatments just to keep their population under control. Fisheries scientists consider the sea lamprey invasion one of the most consequential ecological disruptions in the history of the Great Lakes. It is a reminder that the most damaging creature in an ecosystem is not always the one that bites people directly. If you are finding this as fascinating as I do, now is a great time to hit that subscribe button, because the second half of this list gets significantly more dangerous. And the final few entries include the creatures actually responsible for confirmed human illness and death in the Great Lakes region. Let us keep going. At number 7, we move away from bites entirely and into something far less visible. Swimmer's itch, caused by microscopic parasites called avian schistosomes. These parasites are released by infected snails in shallow, warm, weedy areas of the Great Lakes and are designed by nature to burrow into the skin of waterfowl. When they mistakenly burrow into human skin instead, they cannot complete their life cycle, but the body's immune reaction causes an intensely itchy rash that can last for more than a week. Public health departments around Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, and Lake Erie issue swimmers' itch advisories every summer, and beaches are occasionally closed specifically because of high concentrations of these parasites. It rarely causes serious medical complications, but the sheer number of documented cases every year, sometimes in the thousands across a single state, makes it one of the most common creature-related health issues connected to the lakes. And some lakefront communities now post daily risk advisories right alongside their regular weather forecasts. Number 6 takes us onto the wooded trails and dune grasses that surround the lakes rather than the water itself, where the black-legged deer tick waits. These ticks are firmly established throughout the forests, parks, and shoreline vegetation of the entire Great Lakes Basin and are the primary carrier of Lyme disease in the region. A tick bite itself is painless and often goes unnoticed, but untreated Lyme disease can lead to serious joint, heart, and neurological complications weeks or months later. Health departments in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ontario have all documented steadily rising Lyme disease case numbers over the past 2 decades as tick populations expand into new areas. Unlike a dramatic animal encounter, this is a slow, quiet danger, one that thousands of hikers, campers, and beachgoers around the Great Lakes are exposed to every single season without ever seeing the creature responsible. Public health officials generally recommend a full-body tick check after any time spent in dune grass or wooded trails, since early removal significantly lowers the risk of infection. At number 5, we have a group of creatures responsible for more emergency room visits around the Great Lakes each summer than almost anything else on this list combined. Stinging insects, specifically bees, wasps, and yellow jackets that nest heavily in the sandy dunes and wooded picnic areas surrounding the lakes. For the vast majority of people, a sting causes brief, sharp pain and swelling. But for people with severe allergies, a single sting can trigger anaphylaxis, a life-threatening reaction that requires immediate medical treatment. Across the entire United States, stinging insects are consistently documented as causing more confirmed human deaths per year than sharks, bears, and snakes combined. And the Great Lakes shoreline, with its dense summer crowds and abundant insect activity, is no exception to that national pattern. Late summer, when yellowjacket colonies reach their largest size, is consistently the peak period for sting-related medical calls at public parks and campgrounds. Our next entry moves us back into the water itself and into a threat that made national headlines in 2014. At number 4, we have toxic blue-green algae. Technically, a type of bacteria called cyanobacteria that blooms across warm, nutrient-rich sections of the Great Lakes, most notably the western basin of Lake Erie. These blooms produce a toxin called microcystin, which can cause liver damage, skin irritation, and severe gastrointestinal illness in humans who swim through it, or, in the most extreme case, drink contaminated water. In August of 2014, a major cyanobacteria bloom contaminated the water supply for the city of Toledo, Ohio, forcing officials to warn nearly 500,000 residents not to drink or even boil their tap water for several days. Every summer since, water quality officials continue to monitor and, when necessary, close beaches across Lake Erie due to these blooms, driven largely by agricultural runoff feeding the algae's growth, and satellite imagery is now used to track bloom size and warn coastal communities in advance. At number 3, closely related to that same water quality concern, we have waterborne bacteria, most commonly strains of E. coli, that periodically spike in Great Lakes water following heavy rainfall, which washes runoff and sewage overflow into the lakes. Beaches across Chicago, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Toronto are regularly and temporarily closed by local health departments after routine water testing detects bacteria levels that exceed safe swimming thresholds. For most healthy swimmers, exposure causes stomach illness, but for young children, elderly individuals, and people with compromised immune systems, infections can become serious enough to require hospitalization. These closures happen so routinely that most local news stations around the Great Lakes run seasonal beach water quality reports, a quiet but constant reminder that the water itself can carry real risk long before any animal is involved. Environmental agencies on both sides of the border have invested heavily in modernizing sewer systems specifically to reduce these overflow events. Though heavy storms can still overwhelm even upgraded infrastructure during the wettest parts of the summer season. Which brings us to number 2, and the only venomous snake native to the entire Great Lakes region, the eastern massasauga rattlesnake. This is a small, thick-bodied rattlesnake, rarely exceeding 2.5 feet in length, found in wetland prairies and marshy shoreline habitat in parts of Michigan, Ohio, Ontario, and other areas bordering the lakes. Despite its small size, its venom is a potent mix of compounds that affect blood clotting and tissue. And while fatalities are extremely rare thanks to modern antivenom and its generally shy, non-aggressive nature, untreated bites have caused severe tissue damage, and the species is taken seriously enough that it is listed as federally threatened, with conservation officials tracking both its dwindling population and its documented bite history closely. Massasaugas almost always try to avoid confrontation first, using their rattle as a warning, and the majority of bites occur when people accidentally step near one hidden in tall grass or attempt to handle it directly. Conservation programs across the Great Lakes Basin now work directly with landowners to preserve the wetland habitat this snake depends on, since habitat loss, not human conflict, remains the single greatest threat to its long-term survival in the region. Which brings us, finally, to number 1, and the twist that surprises almost everyone watching this list for the first time. The deadliest creature connected to the Great Lakes is not a fish, not a reptile, and not anything most people would think to fear near the water. It is the mosquito. Great Lakes wetlands, marshes, and standing water after summer rains create ideal breeding grounds for mosquito populations across the entire basin. And several mosquito species in the region are confirmed carriers of West Nile virus. Public health departments in Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Ontario report confirmed human West Nile virus cases and, in a documented number of severe cases each year, fatalities, particularly among older adults and people with weakened immune systems. On a global scale, mosquitoes are already recognized by health organizations as the deadliest animal to humans on the planet, responsible for far more deaths annually through disease transmission than any predator, and the Great Lakes region is no exception to that pattern. Local health departments trap and test mosquito samples throughout the summer specifically to monitor for West Nile virus activity before it spreads widely into the human population. And years with unusually warm, wet springs tend to produce the largest mosquito populations and, in turn, the highest number of confirmed cases. Every other creature on this list combined has caused a fraction of the documented human harm attributed to mosquito-borne illness around these lakes, which is exactly why, despite its size, it earns the top spot. So, there you have it. 15 creatures that call the Great Lakes home, or at least call its shorelines home, ranging from the merely startling to the genuinely dangerous. The mosquito taking the top spot is a reminder that the biggest threats in nature are rarely the ones we are trained by movies to fear. A 5-inch fish with teeth gets more attention than an insect you can barely see, even though the numbers tell a very different story. Of course, a list like this could always be expanded. Maybe you think another Great Lakes species deserves a spot we did not cover. Or maybe you have had a personal encounter with one of these creatures yourself. Either way, drop a comment below and let me know what you would add or which entry surprised you the most. I read every single one. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and I will see you in the next video.